Hi, good afternoon. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, thank you. It's just 1 o'clock. I'm going to give it a minute or so to just let a few more people check in, and then I'll kick it off. Okay. I am going to share my screen and start the PowerPoint. All right, well, welcome everybody. This is the workshop for the Morris County Trail Construction Grant Program. We're opening up our 7th application cycle this year in 2022. I am recording today's session, and it will be posted on the program website. If any of your colleagues or friends want to take a listen and can't participate today, or if you need to go back and review something, we'll have this uploaded on the program website. But essentially, today I'm gonna do an overview of some of the program basics, review the application that's online. There's a couple different things we can walk you through, as well as show you some samples of some expectations that we might be looking for with your submissions. Excuse me. And I do want to ask that we hold all questions until the end. We will provide plenty of time to review everyone's questions at the end, but if I can just kind of power through the presentation, and we'll take questions one by one at the very end. So let me kick it off, and just as I mentioned, this will be our 7th year of applications. The first year was back in 2016. And to date, we've issued a total of 39 grant awards for just over $4 million with 23 miles of trail. I think that's, we had the great honor of building this program on the many other preservation trust programs. So we had some good models to follow and were able to hit the ground running. But, I think we made a lot of progress in a short amount of time. So congratulations to everyone. As I mentioned, the Trail Construction Grant Program is part of the Preservation Trust Program. It was added via a referendum back in 2014 with overwhelming majority of support. And in a quick time, as I mentioned, it was approved in 2014, and we had the program up and running by 2016. The funding comes from the Preservation Trust tax, and we are using the previous year's tax that come in for this particular program. And this year, we estimate that there'll be $1.8 million available for the 2022 cycle. That's coming from last year's taxes. The purpose is to distribute the grants for the design and construction of trails to provide recreational use opportunities which benefit communities and enhance the quality of life for residents of Morris County. Pretty simple. The program structure is a collaboration between the Morris County Office of Planning and Preservation and the Morris County Park Commission. I am an employee here at the Morris County Park Commission, and we collaborate with the Planning and Preservation. The advisory committee is 9 members, including 4 from the Park Commission Rec Trail Committee, 2 from Planning and Preservation boards, as well as 3 additional at-large community members. Just to give you an overview of this year's calendar. As I mentioned, the applications just last week opened up. So we are now, the window is open. And throughout that window, May through July, we are holding pre-application meetings, and you'll hear more about those. The application process is a 2-step process, the first being the letter of intent, which is due at the end of June 30th. And then the second part, the full application, is due at the end of July. And we are following, this has been our typical calendar for this program. And we're trying to maintain that so that everything is done very neatly within a calendar year. So again, that June and July timeframe. And then we'll do, we'll review the applications for eligibility and questions through August and September, and we'll do deliberations with the advisory committee in October. The advisory committee makes their recommendations in November. I call it the Thanksgiving meeting. We'll make the recommendation to the county commissioners in November. And then the commissioners will announce their awards at the December meeting. And that is typically, you know, a clean annual calendar. I do want to caveat that by saying if for whatever, if we happen to get an overwhelming amount of applications, this may flex slightly, but I don't see it going much further than, you know, a month or so. Just some basic requirements I'll quickly review. All projects that come in for a trail grant must occur on permanently preserved public parkland or private land that has a dedicated easement for recreational use. And this is very purposeful so that the funds aren't undone later on in any way. The project needs protection through these mechanisms of being permanently preserved or with that dedicated easement for recreational use. The program operates with a 80-20 match. 20% matching funds are required of the applicant. And the program operates on a reimbursable basis. So that's very important for you to understand that you'll have to front any dollars coming in and that they're reimbursed once the project is completed. And that's whether you're doing design or construction. Each applicant is limited to 1 application per year. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Moving on, applicants must be in good standing with any current grants that they have active. The project point must be a municipal employee. That's very important that the municipality stay informed about the progress or changes of their project and any changes that might happen in terms of additional dollars that might be needed to be covered. Applicants must also convey a understanding of their project with their submittals. And if you're coming in under the design phase, that's through, you can convey that through the scope of work in your proposal. And if you're coming in through construction, that's conveyed through the actual construction documents. And as I mentioned before about pre-application meetings, all applicants are required to come in for a pre-application meeting. And just a little bit more about those. Pre-application meetings are meant to really share in more in-depth detail about the requirements of the program and expectations of the application. It also gives us better insight as to what your project is and what you're trying to do. So if there's something that you weren't able to convey in your application, but we might have talked about it at a pre-app, we're able to inform the committee about that. So we find it very helpful to both sides, both the applicant and staff, to conduct the pre-application meetings. And it's for us to help guide you to provide your best submission with the application. We're seeing that interest in this program is growing, and with that, the competition will grow as well. So we want everyone to have a clear understanding of the application and what we're asking, and that you can submit your best application. So the pre-applications are conducted now up until the end of the application deadline, being July 29th. You can contact me to schedule those. Feel free to reach out via email, or that's my phone number up there, 973-326-7605. And we'll schedule those on a first come, first served basis. Okay, getting into more details related to the program itself. There are two funding categories that you can come in under. The first one is for design and permitting, and the second one is for construction, and it's an either or. If you remember, you can only submit one application per cycle, so you cannot come in for both simultaneously. The construction phase is divided into two subcategories, minor and major, and I'll review more about this a little bit later. But essentially, the final product, if you come in under what we call phase one, design and permitting, the final product there is the creation of construction documents that you can actually go to bid to build your project and make it a reality. So that final product is plans, specs, and estimates, as well as permit approvals. The award limits for phase one, design and permitting, there's a minimum award of $5,000, regardless what category you come in under. We didn't want to push around a lot of paper for anything under $5,000. And for design and permitting, the maximum award that you would be eligible for is 15% of the estimated construction cost. So as part of the application, we're asking that you submit a estimated construction cost of your project. And we know that that is a very early estimate. But again, this is an industry standard of assuming a design fee of 15% on construction cost. The design and permitting phase, you'll have 2 years to complete the project. Also, as part of this, there'll be interim reviews that are conducted at key milestones of the project development, 30% and 60%. And that's really to ensure that the project is proceeding consistently with what was awarded and just industry best practice standards. And I know I'm kind of I'm kind of blurring the lines between the application process and some of the requirements of the award. So filling in a lot of information now. So, moving on to the construction phase, as I mentioned, there are two subcategories, minor and major. And essentially, the final product here is a finished facility. Again, in accordance with what was awarded and industry standards. But essentially, it's the finished product. You constructed it. It's there for your municipality to use and enjoy. Just quickly, I'll go through more of this a little bit later on, but to come in under the minor category for construction, there are a set of criteria. There are 7 listed here. And we did this because we didn't want to make more simplified projects onerous. We, not every project requires a full set of design documents. So for those more simplistic construction projects, this is where you would come into the program under the minor construction category, so long as you hit these criteria. And I'll review these in more detail later on. For, again, the funding thresholds for construction phase, again, a minimum of $5,000. If you're coming in under the minor category, the maximum award would be for $70,000. And if you're coming in under the major category, the maximum funding would be 60% of the available funding for that particular year. And there is a caveat here. If there is an extraordinary project that comes in a particular funding cycle, the committee does have, the ability to fund additional dollars if they deem that extraordinary project is worthy. So there is a caveat that would allow a particular project to go above this 60%. But that would be, an oddity, of course. So there's different project types, essentially new trails, things that are newly constructed, and as well as motorized and non-motorized types are eligible for construction. There's also a trail enhancement, which is essentially improvements to an existing trail that accommodates an increased volume or makes it ADA compliant. And just to show you an example of a new construction, a new trail coming in, and trail enhancement. If you're coming in under trail enhancement, we'd like to see some documentation as to existing conditions and how that improvement is going to occur. Will it occur through an improved design, through the width, through the trail surface? And keep in mind, this category is not meant to address deferred maintenance. It's to improve volume, capacity, and access. And here's just an example of a trail enhancement. Initially, it was a mowed pathway, and the improvement went to a more stone surface, and so that would be considered a trail enhancement. As I mentioned, the application process is 2 steps. The first being the letter of intent, and the second is the full application, due a month apart. And please do visit our website, which is listed here. This is where you'll find the application materials, as well as many other resources to help you either design your project, cost estimates, and so forth.
You want the Hells Angels flag up there.
Okay, the letter of intent, that first step, is essentially to verify ownership. And part of what the submission there is, we're looking for a copy of deeds to ensure that the project is permanently preserved public parkland or has that easement. So you do need to verify ownership as part of this first step. We're also looking for a project map that indicates the block and lots that you'll be using to build on, and where the trail lies in relationship to those parcels and anything surrounding. We'll also be looking for very early cost estimates. We understand that you're probably still sharpening your pencils, but trying to get an early idea of what people are looking for in terms of what the matches might be and what the requested grants might be. And this is just an example of what that letter of intent looks like. Pretty simple. Project name, the category you're looking at coming in, whether or not you're looking at doing new trail construction or trail enhancement, municipal information, the project contact. And on the second page is the documentation of the block and lot and whether or not it's owned via fee simple or if it's an easement. And then under section 8 here, the estimated project cost. If you're coming in under the design and permitting phase, you would use the section on the left. If you're coming in under construction, you would use the section on the right here. This only requires a mayor's signature. I do want to remind everyone that a resolution is required with the submission of the full application at the end of July. So if you have any summer holidays or breaks or vacations with everyone, please put that on your calendar. Resolutions end of July along with the application. So there is a separate application depending on which category you're coming in. If you're coming in under design and permitting, there's a separate application for that. If you're coming in for construction, either minor or major, that's a different application. I do want to note that they are very similar with the exception of sections 6 for under the design application. We're looking for the proposal or the scope of work that you'll be looking to complete, that you'll be looking for funding for. And then under construction, essentially what we're looking to be submitted there under minor construction, basically verification of those criteria that we outlined. Or if you're coming in for major construction, we'd be looking for the actual plans, specs, and estimates to be submitted along with the application. And I'm going to walk through these sections. We'll do the design application first, and then the components of the construction. But as I mentioned before, essentially the final products for the design and permitting phase would be the completion of construction documents so that you and your municipality can go and build the facility. All right, I'm gonna break this and go to the program website. Can you all see the website?
Yes.
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 Great. So as I mentioned, the Trail Grant is part of the Greater Preservation Trust program. And if you enter the site there, just a little tidbit, and I'm going to go down here to the grant applications. Here's what I was just talking about, the letter of intent, step 1. And here are the 2 different applications. 1 is for the design and permitting, and 2 is for the construction grant if you're coming in there. So let's start with the design and permitting and walk you through some of the basics. Deadline, July 29th. Ownership needs to be permanently preserved or a dedicated easement. Essentially, the application needs to convey a clear understanding of the project needs, and we'll be looking to do that through a proposal of the scope of work to outline the tasks that are required to design your project. As I mentioned, there's 20% matching required. It's the program is done on a reimbursable basis, and there'll be 2 years to construct. So just walking through some of the basics here, the applicant information, municipality, if you're using a licensed professional, indicating who that is. Section 2 is indicating what type of project you're doing. Is it new construction or enhancement? It could be a combination of both. Section 3 is a description of your project, giving us some background and why it's important and the details of what the project is. And still under section 3, we're asking about what phase of development is your project in. Are you simply at the idea phase? Have you developed anything conceptual? Is it purely a line on the map and you still need to do more vetting? Or have you done some feasibility around your project already? And section B asks about that. What sort of feasibility have you completed thus far as part of your project? And feasibility, what we talk about there is, research and investigation, any planning and analysis. Did you look at any 2 different alignments potentially, and what was the evaluation process and how you chose the project that you're pursuing, as well as any obstacles that you'll need to integrate and design for in your project. Those are the sort of things that we're looking for when we're asking you about the project feasibility. Excuse me. Section 4, funding strategy, is asking you how are you going to achieve the 20% match? Is it going to be another grant source? If so, what is that grant? And provide us verification of that. Are you using any sort of in-kind services? For instance, maybe you already have a surveyor on as part of your municipal services, and you're going to use the survey as part of your matching funds. So how is that 20% going to be achieved? Or will you simply use open space dollars? Section B, the long-term funding. This is more really fits with a project that might be multi-phased or something that might be very expensive to build. What's the strategy to do the long-term construction? So that's something if you're looking at implementing something in phases or something that might be extraordinarily expensive. Section 5 is project maps and site photos. This is, I forgot to mention earlier. This year we really have no changes to the program, with the exception of some additional application elements, and this is one of those. So we're asking for specific photos to be included to document existing conditions, along with your location map. That should include simple things like the block and lot, labeled streets, north arrows, and a scale to give us some sense of surrounding destinations. Is there a nearby park? Are there existing trails? And what is the location of your proposed project in relationship to all of those things? The newer elements that we're adding here are B, C, D, and E. And these are direct web resources to find out more about your project location. So what we're asking you to do is go to these web resources and create a little map of your project location to inform us about some of those resources that might be surrounding it and impacting your project. For instance, the GeoWeb database tells you things like historic districts and any environmental features that might come into play with the development of your project. And the National Wetlands Inventory. These are all links directly to those resources, and it allows you to bring in different layers. And this one will tell you about wetlands and wetland resources in relation to your project. So again, providing us more information about the surrounding resources of your project location. And of course, the photos, as I mentioned, we're asking for a minimum of 6 with captions that tell us what those existing conditions are all about and what things you might be encountering on site. And then the last one here is a project video, which is optional. This is not required, but I believe the Open Space program has recently added this to their application process, and they found it very helpful. So we're going to give it a try. We'd like you to keep it under 10 minutes. And, you know, so if you feel so inclined, feel free to include that. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. So I'm just showing you some examples of mapping. This is a good example of showing different phases in relationship to surrounding resources and other existing and proposed trails. Another good example, if anyone familiar with Wharton and their Irondale Mountain, this shows a lot of information related to area resources like the West Morris Greenway, and they're also showing existing and proposed trail work in and around their town. So just giving you some examples of good submissions. And then along with the photos, you know, the photo should give us a clear indication of what your existing conditions look like. You know, in this particular example, there's a lot of wetlands that this project submitted, as well as a roadway crossing that in this example, they conveyed what that crossing looks like. So the application requirements for the design and permitting, as I was mentioning, asks for a proposal. And this is essentially an outline of the scope of work or task that will need to be completed to complete the construction documents. We're asking for a breakdown of the design fee with an hourly breakdown by task. Line item lump sums are not acceptable. We need to see a breakdown of how that will be completed. We are also asking that an early construction cost estimate be submitted, and we understand that this is very preliminary, but essentially this is used to estimate the maximum grant award of 15% based on the construction cost. And just to give you an example, this is an earlier scope of work submitted last year for a project. They're including things like survey, design services, environmental assessment, and then there's a breakdown for each of those tasks by the participant doing the work. So this is what we're looking for when we ask for a proposal and design fee. And I'm just going to go back to the application section. This is the section where we ask about the design proposal. And what I've listed here, number 1 through 6, is just some tasks that you might encounter with your project. This is not limited to these. Every project is different, it has different requirements of what will be needed, but this is kind of a fairly generic task summary of what a project can anticipate, including things like preliminary and final design, survey, environmental assessment that looks at wetlands and soils and stormwater. Will your project require anything related to structures and bridges or walls? And of course, the permitting. What's required? How will it be addressed? And the development of bid specifications. So this is what's expected in terms of design proposals. And as I mentioned, the breakdown of the fee for that proposal, along with a schedule and the cost estimate. I'm going to go back to PowerPoint. So in the next section, we ask to tell us about the project team and who are you working with. And we're asking about this in requesting resumes for the key personnel that you'll be either from the municipality, or if you're working with a licensed professional. Who are you working with and what is their experience with trails? So we'd like to see more about who you're working with on your team. In addition, just a reminder that the primary point still needs to be the municipal employee, even if you are working with a licensed professional like an engineer or a landscape architect leading up your project. The municipal employee still needs to play a part in understanding what's happening with the project. As I mentioned, the design fee will come from the proposal with your outlined task. Let me just go back to, and I apologize for going back and forth, but I thought it was best to just roll through the application itself. Excuse me. So Section 8 talks about the project cost and your match. And essentially that design fee comes from your proposal and that summary. And basically the required match is 20% of that fee. And your requested grant would be the fee minus the 20%. That would be your requested grant. And remember, the requested grant can only be a maximum of 15% of the estimated construction cost. All right. In terms of schedule, again, 2 years to complete for design and permitting for plan, specs, and estimate. There'd be an expected review or staff reviews at critical milestones of 30 and 60% to ensure the project is moving along as it was awarded and consistent with design standards. The next portion of the application asks about the trail design intent, and that comes from the U.S. Forest Service, this manual. It's called Trail Fundamentals and Trail Management Objectives. And essentially, we're asking you to give us more information and think about really what kind of trail you're developing. And we ask you to identify the class, and it goes anywhere from class 1, most minimally developed. This would be kind of a backcountry, natural, narrow trail, on up to trail class number 5, which is a fully developed shared use path that looks probably something similar to Lewanika Brook. So just asking you to think about what sort of trail you're building and include that in the application. And then if you assign that trail class a little further down to the user, this gives you some real parameters of how the trail should be built in terms of width and clearing, grades, and so forth. So this is just a guideline for you to check in developing the design of your trail. Okay, as I mentioned, the applications are very similar between design, between design and construction. And the main differences are right here. Section 6 for design is the design proposal. And for construction, it's documents, basically. And I'm going to give you an example of what we're looking for submission under the construction application under those sections. Again, the final products are for the construction phase is the actual facility, a completed and usable trail facility. Again, this will also require pre-application meetings so that we can evaluate mainly the eligibility of the minor category, because that has the different criteria behind it, as well as to assess the constructability, and ensuring that what you've submitted includes, it's construction ready, essentially. Do you have your details, the plan specs and estimates, and are your permits ready? So for the minor criteria, as I mentioned before, there's 7 here, and this is meant for those more simplistic projects that don't require in-depth design drawings. So there's 7 criteria here. Of course, the pre-application that I keep mentioning. The others is that the project itself would cost $70,000 or under, that the length would be 1 mile or less, that it would be of natural surface, have minimal slopes under 8% or under, and would have very few major features to be constructed or permitted, like walls and bridges. And there'd be minimal to no agency review required. Is it permit by rule, or very minimal permitting required? So, if your project can meet these criteria, those smaller, more simplistic things that are ready to go, things that maybe your DPW could knock out, this is probably the area where your project fits best. And I'm just going to give you, this is an example of what one of those projects might be. And again, we don't have specific criteria in terms of application submissions, other than you can provide verification that it meets those criteria through simple mapping. And this one is a combination of mode paths and dirt paths. So again, it's a very simple project. There's not a lot to get it off the ground. And it could be done by a local DPW or even volunteers. So just another good example of keeping it simple. And there's a resource, as part of this, we're asking for a cost estimate. And on the program website, there is a cost estimate form there that is this form, essentially, that prompts you through all of the things that you might encounter, and to help you develop that preliminary cost estimate so that you know what to be asking for your grant. So utilize that cost estimate that's on the program website. It'll help these smaller, more simplistic projects get fully developed to be able to understand what you need. All right, that's minor. So for the major construction category, we're looking for plans, specs, and estimates, as well as permits and a construction schedule. Essentially, the application needs to convey that you are ready to construct this project. That's what we're looking for to be submitted. And as an example, these are just some previous construction plans of a trail project that was completed through our program a few years ago. So it tells you exactly what's where. There's a grading plan, there's lighting plans, there's construction details. There's everything in this package needed to hand over to someone to be able to build, including things like quantities and estimates. So if you're coming in for the construction category, this is what we expect to see in terms of submission with your application. And as I mentioned before, the minimum thresholds for award for construction, a minimum of $5,000. If you're coming in under the minor category, the maximum award would be $70,000. And for major, it's 60% of the available funding, unless it's an extraordinary project and the committee feels differently about funding more. So I'm going to move into the evaluation process and what happens after you submit your application. Basically, after everything comes in, staff reviews it for basic eligibility requirements. Does it include, do you own all the parcels? Is it permanently preserved public parkland? And did we receive all the correct information as part of the submission application? We will be reviewing things and do expect that we might have some additional questions or clarifications afterward, and that we might ask for additional materials or clarifications on, let's say, mapping, or maybe some additional photos of things that we read about in your description but didn't see a picture of. So you may hear back from us immediately after your submission to get more information or clarification. And once we do that, it moves on to the advisory committee, where they evaluate their specific criteria. They also evaluate the project readiness and understanding of each of the projects. And they also may have further questions and clarifications on your project. And at that point, we would send emails back and forth to get clarification for the committee's specific questions. Then it moves on to deliberations. And as I mentioned, that is typically in October timeframe. And then it moves, the committee makes a recommendation to the county commissioners for award, typically in December. Okay, pre-application meetings. We are now open for business, so to speak, and those will be held, up till the end of July. All applicants are required to attend the pre-apps, and please contact me for advanced scheduling of getting those on all of our calendars. Just a quick lessons learned. I know this is a lot to take in, but don't rush your application. I know everyone's very anxious about grants and to chase the money and, oh my God, let's get an application in. Our advice at this point is complete some early work to understand the needs of your project and the cost. Meet with DEP early on. What are they going to be asking of you? So, this is a very early program in terms of the Preservation Trust grant programs. This is our 7th year. We are not going anywhere. We will be here for many years to come. The lessons learned are to do a little bit of the legwork, the feasibility assessment, to understand what the project needs. Because we want you to ask for what you need. We don't want you to fall short with your project. We want you to be successful with your submission and your design and your construction. So, give it its due course of prepping it in the right way. Everyone gets so excited to submit something, and we want you to be able to, if you need $100,000 to finish your project, we want you to ask for the amount of money that's required to do it correctly. So that's really our lessons learned to date. And because it is such a new program, we are learning every year. Every year we tweak and change to adjust it to make this the best program for every municipality. And I do have to say, last year was our first year in integrating the design phase, and we were able to bring in some new municipalities into the program, and I expect that will continue to grow. And we want everyone, the purpose is to get trails built to improve the recreational access throughout the county. So we want to help you get it right. And with that, I'm going to just put my information up again about scheduling pre-apps. This is how to get in touch with me. That's my email address and my phone number. And I'm going to open it up to questions, and bear with me. Whew. Stop sharing. Okay.
Hi, Denise. Todd
Yes.
from the Environmental Committee in Kinnelon. Number one, thank you for this presentation. It's really, really wonderful. My question is, will your slides be made available for download so that we can, circulate it amongst our committee members?
Absolutely. In addition to this recording, I will put the PowerPoint on the program website for you to go back and look at these things. And I know this is all a lot of information very quickly, and that's another reason we do the pre-app, so that we can kind of slow this down a little bit and make it personal to help you along with your own submission. So don't feel like you need to walk away today and understand all of this. That that pre-app will say all of this over again and slower and more specific to your project.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
I have a question.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Charlene Oslider. I work with the town of Boonton.
Hi.
Hi. We actually just spoke the other day about, right. So we currently have a planning grant, design and permitting one in play. Obviously, we're just getting started. So my question was, in terms of being in good standing, does that mean any current projects need to be completed by the time we would submit the application, or does that mean we just have to be on schedule?
Well, and it's a bit of a mixed answer I'm going to give you, because the requirements to come into the construction phase are completed construction documents. So you would need to be fairly well along in your process.
Right. Our mayor had another, I believe, planning stage in mind for a different aspect of our trails in town. So I just didn't know if we would be eligible to apply.
Yes, you would be. Yes, you would be eligible. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I must have really hit everything on the head there. Well, again, I can't, it's the program is growing every year. It's really exciting to see the different kinds and diversity of projects coming in. So, for me, every year is, I just can't wait to see who's doing what next. And, we are here to help you get it right. And if there's a question or a challenge you're facing, please feel free to come let us know. Maybe there's another municipality that has encountered something similar that we can, help guide you through. I talk about vetting the project and, understanding more of the needs. And I know several folks have been tied up with DEP. So it's important to understand what they're looking for in your projects. And, if there's something that we can help convey to you with a previous lesson learned elsewhere, we can do that as well. But I highly recommend the pre-apps. That's one we can kind of make this a little bit more personal and apply the program to your project and get a better understanding of what you're trying to achieve. So I don't want to take up any more time than I need to, and I kind of saying the same thing over and over and over again. But check out the program website. There's so much information there, a lot of different resources. And actually, I'm going to see if I can go there one more time before we exit. Did you have a question? I'm not sure if someone's talking or if that was a question. Just to give you, I'm going to point out some other resources on our website. There's submission instructions here. That cost estimate I talked about for doing in working with the miner. That's located here. You just download that and do a save as. It's an auto populate. So this can kind of walk you through prompting you on some of the needs if you're just starting out. Give you an idea of what some of the basic needs are.
I'm sorry, I don't think you have screen share on.
Okay. That would help, wouldn't it? Okay, let's try that again. How about now? You see the website?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great, great. So here we are under the application section. Here's today's workshop. This is where we'll be posting both the PowerPoint and the recording under this section.
Mhm.
Here's information about the pre-app, the letter of intent again, the application. This is the construction cost estimate I talked about. If that opens up, that's that construction cost estimate. You just do the save as and use that for your own project. The other highly recommend, this is the U.S. Forest Service, those charts, matrices I mentioned earlier, those are listed here. And also listed, another good resource is a sample resolution. And don't forget the timing of that resolution. If you've got vacations and holidays planned, that's due with your application at the end of July. Then, of course, the submissions, we're looking for a total of 3 copies, 1 original, 2 copies to be submitted. You can drop it off here. You can send it in the mail. Whatever you decide to do is fine. And that's other things. I also encourage you to look at the rules and regulations. Of course, this is, a little dry, but it gives you great insight as to what the expectations are if you are awarded a grant and what you're held accountable to. Under links, there's a lot of different resources here in terms of design resources. I highly encourage you to come here, or your professionals. Trails are very much a niche. Not everyone knows how to plan and design a trail. These are some great resources to utilize and build your project from.
What I'm doing now, plus a little bit more fire inspection. It's all on fire.
Okay, I'm going to come back. Stop sharing. All right, any other questions? Wow, well, all that in an hour. There we go.
Efficient. Thank you so much, Denise.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I look forward to hearing from everyone and scheduling that pre-app. And no question is out of range. So any way we can help guide you in this process, we're here. We're here for you. Good luck, everybody, and we look forward to seeing your applications.
Thank you so much, Denise.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Very informative.
Really good. It was really informative. Very detailed.
Good,
Right.
good.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.